Hello and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
First of all, thanks Ryan and Heather for having me. Fun to have a conversation with you today. So yeah, I am Jed Ayres. I'm the CEO of Igel. Igel has historically been known as, especially in Europe, as a dominant thin client player. I joined the company 4 years ago with the sort of charge of bringing the company into the United States. They had tried a few times, so that was my goal, was to bring Igel into the U.S., but not necessarily as a thin client company, really orienting it around the IP, around the operating system. And, really the other charge was to take over marketing. And so all the marketing up until I got here had been done in German. So this was like a transition to put it in English, bring it into the U.S., and really invert the story and emphasize the operating system and the management console. So yeah, it's been a remarkable ride over the last 4 years. We've more than doubled the size of the company, both in people and in revenue, and suddenly finding ourselves in the middle of the largest companies in the world that are really getting huge value out of a Linux operating system to connect to the cloud workspaces. So how we describe ourselves today is we're like this edge operating system that's sort of hyper tuned to consume a Citrix or a VMware or a Microsoft or an Amazon. And, the operating system is a super important part of the layer of technology. The fact that we can put it on all kinds of x86 and soon ARM devices and breathe a lot of life into older devices and extend the life of them, make them easier to manage, make them more secure, and ultimately deliver a really good experience to the end user. That's really what our value proposition has been, and it's been really fun to work for a company that has such a great piece of technology, has a great culture around innovation and around sort of just partnering, not only with customers but also this big broad ecosystem of people. And I think we're at an inflection point in the world right now where Linux is suddenly extraordinarily relevant on the desktop of your average worker. And so, we find ourselves with a super mature piece of technology at a moment, especially with COVID, where you have the edge has become more important than ever, and the cloud has become more important than ever.
Yeah,
so that's me.
It's funny you mentioned Linux. Heather and I have been discussing in our sort of weekly catch-ups how much I hate Windows 10. And hate's probably a strong word. But I've really struggled, compared to Windows 7 and that stability, just with the way that Windows 10 is operating now. I don't believe it's actually meant to go onto laptops. I think it's meant for a virtual desktop, and I think the idea is to get to something like an Agile at least. To give you a thin client or use your own device to connect to your corporate device that's hosted in a cloud environment. And you can then have an evergreen Windows 10 build that's looked after, etc., that run on known infrastructure and stable and roll out as quickly as they wanted to roll out, where, the average consumer using a laptop now, the 2014 update fails every time you do that. End users shouldn't be dealing with that kind of stuff. I think you guys are going to be well positioned in the future. Now, this is not a prediction or financial advice, but I think you're going to be in a good position in the market because you offer that gateway to, as you say, from the edge into the cloud.
It's kind of crazy because, of course, you have to have this religious moment where you realize, all right, Windows is great, but it's best consumed out of the cloud, right, where it can be centrally managed and secured and patched. And, we've had this sort of 35 years of, this idea that freedom was created, right? The whole like PC revolution, and there's a lot of emotional attachment that comes with, this is my PC. I have my, applications and my data sit on this device. And I think the world is actually ready for this radical departure from that, right? That says, nope, doesn't matter really about the device, right? The device could be any device, as long as it's tuned to deliver a great experience from these cloud applications. And I think that's where we're headed, right? Because for 35 years, it was sort of like this hamster wheel of, okay, I'm going to give you a bigger processor, and Microsoft is going to give you a more powerful, bigger, operating system. And we've got to this point where it's just almost unwieldy, right? To your point, especially when you have hundreds of millions of people that are now working from home, getting that update from Microsoft several times a week can be extraordinarily disruptive and hard for companies to manage through that. And it's very expensive. I mean, when we see and I get a bird's eye view of a lot of the customers that are, have made it to Windows 10, and they have, one person to 250 endpoints that they're managing. You're like, whoa, that ratio. We have customers that have 30, 50,000 devices that are being managed by a single person.
Yeah.
There's like a huge difference. So, I mean, when we think about Linux, we look at it and go, okay, Linux is one everywhere, right? Like there's no place in compute where Linux isn't pervasive, right? Whether it's embedded, your Tesla, your medical devices, your ATMs, your gas pumps, your cell phones, 4 out of 5 cell phones are using a Linux derivative, all the way up to like, every cloud workload, pretty much every supercomputer. The one place where Linux has not, dominated is on the desktop. We think this is going to change.
And you can see that now with the distributions that are available. I mean, I've rebuilt a machine now, which I've started using on a Linux distro, and barring finding the apps that you used to in the Windows and ecosystem, it's pretty much like for like. And you just need to find that app. Like I need to find Drive equivalent, for example. Right. But you can find, you've got many mail apps, you've got LibreOffice that works with Office files. So that transition, which used to be very difficult, is now a lot easier.
Well, I think Microsoft is actually going to make it a lot easier too, right? Because their whole emphasis is to put everything into Azure, right? So the receiving device is in the operating system it's running. While they would like to keep it on Microsoft, the new ethos around Satya is, as long as we're growing Azure at 50% quarter over quarter, that's where the real value of Microsoft that's being created, right? And I think we watched what they did with Office 365, right? In 2014, 2015, when Satya took over, it was almost unheard of to be running Exchange, and the whole Office franchise was very on-prem. Right now, it's all in Azure. Right, 80+% of every enterprise is running their Office 365. I think the next frontier is how do we get all these Win32 apps migrated up into Azure? How do we get the whole desktop and application experience being delivered from Azure? That's the next sort of, big transition. And that's where Igel comes in and sort of slides in underneath that as the perfect operating system to take cost out and just simplify, make it easier to secure it. I mean, security is a huge deal, and part of what's driving our business is all these ransomware attacks. And, we saw people that sent people home with brand new laptops that have, $3,000 laptops with Windows 10 on it, and like literally the first day they get hit with ransomware.
Jeez.
And so this is the security message around Linux just being sort of so hardened, right? A read-only file system that, really is, it's very difficult to insert malware and, all the virus stuff that comes, along with Windows. With Igel, it's like literally the device, if it doesn't have the checksums and the boot sequence, it won't even start. It just doesn't start. It's like bricked, right? So a lot of chain of trust and sort of things that can be done with security when you're dealing with like a super small operating system. That's the other key, right? This operating system is now down below a gig, right? The smallest Windows distribution is the IoT, which is around 16 gigs. I mean, there's a big difference between, less than a gig and a 16 gig, right, in terms of attack surface. I think security is going to become a bigger part of the story, especially with how distributed the workforce is right now.
No, exactly. I mean, we've talked to some other guests about that, in people that are working from home, walking around in their gardens, talking on conference calls, leaving paperwork open, leaving desktops unlocked because they're at home now and they're safe. You need to re-educate everybody because they don't have that sanctity of an office necessarily, or they're going to be working in co-working places now more than an HQ kind of office.
Yeah.
There was something you mentioned I wanted to touch upon. You mentioned the size of the distribution being under 1 gig versus 16 or I think 21 gigs is the size of Windows 10. I mean, when you guys distribute your new updates and releases, is that then streamed to a device, or how do you handle that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the thing about Igel is it's funny. We sort of monetize and we talk a lot about the operating system. But there's about, I would say, sort of half the value of the company's IP is in that operating system and all the things that are, built around it. But the other half of it is this management console, right? It's this idea that, hey, we're going to build a management console that can sort of precisely manage, over 7,000 different settings on that device once it has an Igel OS on it, right? And we call it the Universal Management Suite, right? The UMS. So it's this management console that you can write policy, you can write scripts and automation around, and you can basically, you can have visibility to your, tens of thousands of devices, and you can update the operating system. And you can do it in a way where literally we can send an entire update to the operating system without restarting it. The user can still be on the device working. So it's way less disruptive than say the monolithic, code that's being sent down to update a Windows device.
And that sort of echoes what I was saying, my experience with the 2014 update. I mean, the amount of times that I've come in the morning, my machine is rebooted without me knowing why. And then also been, the updates are failing all the time, so you can't carry on doing something because it's half installed and half baked some functionality. It's very frustrating. We want to remove that friction. Heather, do you want to jump in with anything?
No, I guess what I'm sort of curious about now is how this whole new world of work has changed things for your customers, changed things for, bringing in new business. Has this time been, how has this time been for Igel? Are people, is this a time where your technology has really been a good fit for what the market needs, or how has your experience been with the whole remote work?
Yeah, it's been really positive overall. Obviously, we're all adjusting to it. I like to say I'm, been stuck in my white padded cell here for the last 8 months. And so that's been obviously quite a bit of getting used to is sort of managing 400 plus people without having to ever being able to go see them and just doing everything through Zoom. That's created a whole new set of skills and, tactics to try to stay connected with people. But as far as Igel goes, our business, Q2 was a little bit of a challenge because everybody sort of, and especially in Europe, was sent home and, life kind of came to a screeching halt for about 60 days. And so we didn't have a great Q2. But what I would say is the tailwind coming out of Q2 as people started to figure out, hey, we need to, harden these environments. We need to secure them. We need to get, tens of thousands of people working at home. We started to see the benefit, we started jumping in and helping people. And so that's been the thing. We're not Zoom, so you don't just like download the software and run with it. We are a hyper sort of tuned piece of the architecture, right? So we actually demand kind of rigorous, extensive testing of peripherals and workflows. We want it to work just as good or better than a fat client. And so it's not like an immediate satisfaction, right? We're seeing a big buildup in the number of people interested, and we're doing more testing. And long term, it's a huge benefit. We're going to be a huge beneficiary of this change.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the ability to reuse hardware. I think there's a lot of organizations that would benefit from not having to get rid of, laptops that they would have got rid of previously after 3 years or whatever it is. If you can reuse it for, especially in the case of the pandemic, where a lot of people were sent home on the day because of a lockdown, and they never worked on a laptop at home before. They had a physical desktop, and they needed to now provision or go buy laptops from the nearest computer shop. Just get any device they could, where the performance of metrics on that device probably wouldn't have been suitable for normal working. You could use something like your technology to connect into a cloud environment and be up and running.
Definitely. I mean, that's one of my favorite, obviously, things we lead with, right? I'm a product of the hippie generation of California. So I love the Mother Earth, and I hate the fact that we've been on this, like I said before, the hamster wheel of, okay, every 3 years you're going to throw that laptop away and you're going to get a new one, right? And that creates 50 million tons of e-waste a year, right? When you think about just sort of how we think about this pursuit of the new shiny object. And so one of the things that's been most gratifying about this job is we walk into huge companies that are working with the big players out there that are sort of built on this sort of 3-year refresh, right? And they're like, hey, you need to get rid of these 12,000 devices. And we tell them, no way, actually, check this out. You don't need to get rid of them. We can just put this software on there. It's like, I have a 2016 Tesla, right? And it's like the car it runs faster and has more features than it did when I bought it in 2016. Igel kind of delivers that same value proposition to some old HP device, right? We actually suddenly make the device more functional, faster, and deliver more secure, better user experience, right? So this whole idea of software defined, it's very real. And especially when you're consuming stuff out of the cloud, all the compute, and the horsepower that you need is up there, right, in the cloud. And so, this has been remarkable for me, right, to be able to walk in. I've been selling IT for 25 years. And to be able to tell somebody, look, you're going to be able to get another 3 to 5 years out of that device. And you're doing it times tens of thousands of devices. This is like a very special moment. And people are investing in Igel and making careers for themselves, right? It's not too often you can walk into a CFO's office and be like, I just saved you $6 million, right? And it's plain as day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can really tell, I think, that customers love Igel and that people are really excited by Igel. I guess, what do you think is the secret behind why you guys have been able to build such a great community and really loyal customer base?
Well, I mean, I look back to like the ethos of our founder. He's this sort of entrepreneurial German. Maybe he's not your traditional German sort of more rigid, right? He's like a sort of open to a lot of new ideas. He's very curious and very empowering to the team that built the software. But he's also a super good listener. So a lot of the value that's inherent in this management tool and all the partnerships that are built into the operating system, these are built out of listening, right? Listening to our customers. And the sort of nature of Linux is such that you can sort of build these little partitions with the code, right? And you're like, oh, this customer needs that. And then you're like, oh, well, there's a lot of customers that would like that. So that partition then gets hardened into the operating system. And I think there's just sort of an ethos around partnering, understanding what that actually means and doing it with trust and integrity. And that drives this company. And then, the idea of hiring great people, empowering them. I mean, for me, it's been a gift. I actually, feel so lucky to lead this company because there's a level of passion that sort of comes along with this, this once in 35-year architectural change that is like this little German company that maybe a lot of people have never heard of on the stage with Microsoft and Amazon and VMware and Citrix, and extraordinarily relevant right now, right? And so this is quite a there's just a lot of passion in the company, right? That pulsates through, and I think it extends out into the community. I know, talked to Doug Brown and the work that he's done. I mean, he has 5,000 people in an online Slack community. They're in 84 countries. They represent about 3,500 unique companies. And so, yeah, this is a very special thing too, right? This fact that digitally through the Igel community, we're having I think they've exchanged 156,000 messages in the last year on that, and they're solving each other's problems. And it's not just about Igel, it's about, the whole end user compute solution. So yeah, that's a special thing. And then of course, we've also aimed at creating before COVID, we were creating a physical version of that, right? With Disrupt. And we meant to just we want to have the conversation, right? These hard conversations about where's the world going and how can we be supportive through that. So yeah, I think I've learned so much in this role and being at this company, but also being part of an ecosystem, right? And I know, Heather, you work for Lakeside, and Lakeside's a super important partner to Igel. You were actually one of the first partners that we actually brought in from the analytics and baked into the OS, right? And I think you guys even filed a patent for the ability to see all the way to an Igel device inside of Lakeside. So yeah, it's been remarkable for me. I think the word I would use is partnership is the true differentiator. That word's used widely, right? And it has different meanings, but I think Igel really understands what it means to create a high value partner.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to attend an in-person Disrupt event one day, maybe, 2-3 years from now, who even knows anymore. But
hopefully sooner than that, I would hope.
Yeah, we'll see. It really depends where you are in the world, I guess. But
well, for me, I have this picture that almost brings tears to my eye when I use it in presentations. I almost hesitate to use it because it's a picture we took of a drone with at the last Disrupt conference. We always do our kickoff right before it, and literally it's the 400 25 people in the company in these chairs, no masks on, right? Because it was February 5th of this year.
Before we knew.
I flew home from there after taking the torch of the new taking on the global CEO role, right? It was all about, hey, I'm going to be very present in Europe. I'm not just this American CEO. I'm gonna be over here. And of course, 6 weeks later, it was the Friday before we shut everything down where I couldn't fly over there that I was actually scheduled to return. So, and of course I haven't been able to go back since. So yeah, it's been a remarkable year when you think about that moment to where we are right now.
Yeah. Sorry guys, I need to, got a personal issue to go deal with. My wife's not feeling very well. I'll leave it running so you guys can just carry on.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, thanks, Jed. Good to meet you.
Hope your wife's all right.
Yes. Cheers, Bye.
Bye. It's going to be an interesting one to edit together. I guess, I'd love to just talk a little bit about how those virtual events went from from Igel's perspective, and whether you were able to kind of capture the same energies in person, or has it sort of been a learning experience?
Well, definitely a learning experience. Yeah. These digital events were, we did the first one in June in the U.S. It was more U.S. time zone oriented. And I think it was remarkable in terms of just exactly how fast we could pull together content and the number of people that were involved. There was over 50 sessions, and also the number of people that signed up for it. And, then, of course, the one thing with physical events has always been okay, we could spend tens of thousands of dollars to try to capture all the video, and then we'd have to edit it and get it into a place where people could consume it. The beautiful thing about these online events is that we did 50 sessions and immediately they're all available for consumption thereafter. So I see that as a positive, and the number of people that were able to attend it was positive. But of course, just the energy and the organic things that happen, it's hard to recreate that, right? In a digital setting, and maybe we'll get better. We'll probably laugh about the way you and I are interacting 10 years from now, right? As the kids today are going to say, oh, this is a very 1.0 kind of interface, right? As the technology gets more.
Get my Oculus on and
right.
I'll just be, yeah.
So yeah, I think, that's that it's clear to me that humans are more resilient and faster to adapt than anyone gives them credit for. Right. I love the quote from Satya where he said 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months in June. That's what he said in their earnings. Right. And you kind of think about some of the customers that I saw, right, that sort of had said, oh, well, there's a portion of people that we have working from home, but we'd never let these people work from home. And then suddenly a call center with 5,000 people in a week's time are all working from home. And then I think shocking everyone with better customer stat scores and faster answering the phone and all the KPIs that they would use to measure these people went way up, right? And yeah, so I think this made the inertia that was in the system, just sort of resistant to some of this technology, it just got wiped out. So that to me is also pretty exciting for what we work, on every day.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as challenging as I'm sure it was, I think it was still pretty remarkable to see those disrupt events come together and, getting the live, music entertainment and everyone on board and all those partners to come together in really a short time frame was still pretty, remarkable, I think. And you still really managed to make it feel like, an exciting, conference sort of environment. And, I've been attending a few of these virtual events because now, sort of one of the upsides is that a lot of them are free and super easy to attend. You just have to log in. So
right. That is the upside, right? It's like all these events that you used to have to pay $2,000 to go to, plus all the travel fees and everything. Suddenly you're able to get all that, without having to do that, pay or take the time to go do it. So yeah, that's got to be a big upside, but there's something magical about humans being face to face. And one thing I think, Heather, that we'll get out of this is like, we don't take for granted. The next time I'm able to sit with you and look across the table and share a meal with you, that's the one thing I really miss, right? I think people find a lot of like common, human spirit connection over food, right? Like over a drink or over a meal together. And I really miss that. I mean, my family loves that I'm here and I'm cooking meals for them every day, but it's the business that happen, the relationships that get built in business over kind of meals and in the hallways. It's hard to get some of that through the Zoom.
Yeah, it's really hard to replace.
Yeah,
certainly. Yeah. So I guess, I'd love to talk about too, like what's new with Igel and what's coming and, how are you envisioning this whole, future of work?
Yeah, I mean, the way I saw a chart the other day, I wish I could, I'll just try to visualize it for you, but it was a great chart that came out from Gartner. And they sort of showed like, hey, maybe at the maximum, there was about 300 million people that were enabled to work remotely in the world in the end of 2019. And that seems about right to me, right? When you think Citrix probably has 100 million customers and VMware and Microsoft, okay, so this is a number you can all kind of agree on. Well, in Q1 and Q2, you essentially saw that shoot up to like over 1 billion, right? And then that to me becomes the high watermark for kind of like, okay, everybody needs to be sort of ready to see that happen again, right? And of course, we're headed into these lockdowns right now, even, right, where we could be in for sort of a dark period. And so business continuity, in my mind, has sort of taken on a new context, right? The most important thing in business continuity is human beings being able to do their job and potentially need to be able to do it at home. So I think there's like this really interesting, opportunity for all of us right now as we help companies sort of, harden the architecture for those 1 billion plus people to flex there. And the chart's interesting because it goes to 2024 and it shows about 600 million people sort of ending up remotely indefinitely, right? So almost double in a 4-year period from the 300 million to 600. So I think, that's remarkable too, because those will be people that are just 100% of the time sitting at home. So I think when I think about the exciting future of Igel, the work from home use case and the things we've done around the UD Pocket, for BYOD, or just the security factors and the performance factors, all these things loom large in helping those billion people figure out how to do that. And maybe we're not the right answer for all of them, but geez, if we can be an answer for a fraction of that, we can build a hugely relevant company. And I think the part that's interesting for us is that we can sit underneath the core leaders that deliver this stuff. And that to me, and so when you asked about the future, that'll be the future, right? It's really about how do we become, super easy to connect to these solutions, right? In a way today where there's not as much testing required, and some of the friction of it, the proof of value or proof of concept that has to happen with every deployment today, and testing each device. Like hopefully we get to a more ubiquitous and less friction to connect to those services. Yeah, that's my vision, at least.
Yeah, it's certainly a lucky time, to be in technology and to be able to solve some of the most critical pain points for our customers. I know we, helped to, move tens of thousands of employees home to basically, before you had this huge office building or a few where everyone would be. And now it's, thousands of mini office buildings, distributed across the globe. So it's definitely been a huge shift and really fascinating to experience firsthand. But I guess what is your hope for, Igel as a company? Do you see sort of in-person offices, like the magic and collaboration that happens there, still being an important part of your culture, or is that something you're evaluating?
I have a funny story for you on that. We have two offices that are pretty big in Germany, one in northern Germany where the company started in Bremen, and the other one's in Augsburg, just outside of Munich, where all our developers are. And then we have offices in the UK and in San Francisco. But the big places were in Munich and or outside of Munich and Augsburg and Bremen. And in the middle of the pandemic, in April, we signed leases on new office parks in both of these companies. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is kind of an unbelievable moment that we would do this. Now, it was a gut check, right? Okay, we have 200 people and there's about 100 in each one of those locations. And we wanted to modernize it. We're busting out of the seams of the location and where all our developers are. They're actually in 3 different buildings. And so we remain sort of very convinced that you're going to still need it to be around people, especially developers. They do a lot of things that are, collaborative. And so actually I feel pretty good about the fact that we locked in on these spaces, and they'll probably be built out a little bit different than we might have imagined at the beginning of this year for sort of that very flexible, work style. Mm-hmm. But Igel's still invested in real estate, and I think it's all about having flexible, modern kind of thought processes. And I just saw Google in the midst of the whole, crazy thing that's happening in San Francisco. They just signed a huge lease for more real estate in downtown San Francisco. I'm sure they're getting it at a, really low price, but I think long term, like we talked about before, humans need to be around humans, and offices aren't going to completely evaporate. So
no, I agree. Well, is there anything coming up with Igel that folks might be interested in learning more about?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to, stay tuned for a whole series of, I think we're going to create the digital, events that we've done virtually. We're going to have a huge series of things we do next year, and we're going to just sort of make it super easy to opt into it, where it'll be disrupt as a service, if you will, right? So this whole ongoing conversation that we'll host throughout the year digitally. Obviously, we expect to be continue to be in a pretty virtual format. So we're going to you're going to see a whole series of things. We're actually starting to do our own video series with thought leaders, kind of like what you do here, Heather, right?
Okay. Called look out for that. Sorry, what's it called? I cut you off.
Attic. The origin story of Igel is that it started in Bremen in a corner attic with the founder, and then there was an attic in Augsburg where they did the development, and I started here in San Francisco also in an attic. So we have this sort of not a garage but an attic story that's pretty humble, and that's the name of it. So I look out for that, and I think, I guess just also continue to look out for the innovation that's coming from the operating system and the management. Over 2,500 like new things built into the product. You can look for some big announcements around ARM in the coming weeks. I think you'll see some big announcements around some of the mainstream hardware vendors out there that names that everyone knows and loves. You're going to see more of them sort of like attaching Igel, at the factory. So kind of like our already Igel, certified and burned in device, whether that's a laptop or a desktop or a thin client. So I think that's also a really exciting moment for Igel, right? As an operating system company, to see huge tech companies basically saying, okay, this is the best in class product. We're gonna basically license it onto our hardware, like a true OEM Igel inside type thing. So powered by Igel. So I think that those are exciting moments for the company, just in terms of broadening our reach.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Looking forward to watching all of that unfold.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for being a supporter of Igel and being part of this community. And, I think that's the other thing that excites me, is just that the whole problem we've all been trying to solve for 20 years is suddenly a very mainstream problem, right? And, this is something that I think has our little echo chamber of, end user compute, whatever it is, 10,000 people that wake up every day and really, have wrestled with this. All of a sudden, this is a mainstream conversation, right? So this is our moment. The year of VDI we've been joking about for years, right?
Yeah.
I think it's finally arrived. It's 10 years late, and it came obviously through a somewhat painful global crisis. But here we are, ready to help the world, right?
Definitely. Well, if our listeners want to follow you on social media, where should they look out for you?
Well, I'm most oriented around LinkedIn. You can just find me at just Jed Ayres, Jed, last name Ayres, Ayres, and same on Twitter. So those are the two big ones that I use.
Fantastic. Well, I'm super excited to, keep following Igel and all the great work you're doing. And thanks again so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I hope you have a great rest of the year, Heather. And here's to 2021 being a whole lot better for everybody. So thanks again.
Hopefully it can only go up from here. So, All right. Well, thanks, Jed.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter at the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website, www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website, www.digitalworkspace.works, and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.